Hello, everyone. Here we are. We are live on Spotlight. We have a spotlight on. It's Thursday. It is the second Christmas day, or some people say Boxing Day. I don't know. There's several names for this day. Here where I am, it's called Stefansdag, like Stephen's Day. So pick one. Anyway, so here we are, and we're here with Todd. Hi, Todd, and thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Paula. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, I mean, I'm so glad that you're here with me because I mean, we know each other. It's a while, several months already. We're connected through an organization where we're both together, and it's the Unicorn Universe. And if you're interested in that, look it up because it's cool. Anyway, and yeah, and I've actually met you in real life as well,
Yes.
and that is the magic. Like we've met online and then we've met in person, and here we are. And I wanted definitely to bring you on to the show because you are an inspiration. Like you really are. Um, and not just to me. And I have to say, like, before we go into your story and all that, but the first time that I heard your story, I was in tears. It touched me so deeply, and it will touch. I mean, it does because it is a very tragic human story, which is unfortunately not a one-off case.
Yeah.
Happens very often, and you have made that, and this happened to you like when you were a small child. So this has whole the impact of that is huge because what care the cares foundation, we're going to go into that, is all about serving to educate people about what happened, pretty much, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So would you like to tell us a little bit about like who you are and where's the main parts of the story and how cares foundation has come to life?
Okay. So yeah, again, my name is Todd, and Paula, thank you so much. Man, it was great. Not only talking to you first, but then meeting you in person was just phenomenal. You're a wonderful person. So thank you. I appreciate that. So CARES Foundation. My mom and my sister were killed by a drunk driver when I was 3 years old. It was June 14th, 1975, and it was the day before Father's Day, and my mom was taking my brother and my sister to my grandmother's house. My sister wanted to bake pie crust with my grandmother, and my brother was going to a 4-H meeting that was across the road from my grandmother's. And I stayed home with my dad. He was breaking a horse that we had, so that's what my dad tells me. I stayed with him, and of course, back then he didn't have cell phones. And my mom had left, and my grandma called and kept calling and calling until my dad finally picked up the phone and answered it. And my grandma said, "Hey, they haven't shown up yet." So my dad says, "Well, we'll get in a Jeep and we'll go that way. Maybe she had a flat tire or something." So my dad tells me he got me in the Jeep, and we drove. And about 3 to 4 miles out of town, we drove up on the wreck. And my dad said he could see it was our car, the back of our car. And he jumped out and started running toward the car. And a friend of his was one of the deputies there. And he turned and saw my dad and basically tackled him in the middle of the highway and told him that my mom and my sister were gone, but that my brother was on the way to the hospital. And so said, you guys need to go. And so there was another officer there from a neighboring town, and he drove us, I guess, to the hospital with lights and sirens going. And that's all I ever knew. Um, and growing up, back in 75, you didn't go to counseling and get help. You just kind of, it was the old adage of buck up, buttercup. That was kind of the adage. And so you just didn't do that. So we just basically, my dad closed my mom and sister's story up and we moved on. Well, I always felt like there was something wrong, something not right with me. And I didn't know what it was. And growing up, fast forward, I won't tell the whole story, but fast forward mid 30s, I get depressed after a divorce, and I almost commit suicide. And after that, I went through 4 years of counseling, learned how to deal with things, and realized actually what that feeling was that I had was general anxiety and separation anxiety. So in those 4 years, I learned how to uh, cope with the anxiety without taking medication. And so to this day, I have the anxiety. Some days it'll get me down. It's like you tip your hat and say, okay, do my self talk and the things that I've learned to do, and I'll go for a drive. That relaxes me. And so then I'll fast forward again. Here 2.5 years ago, I finally, I've spoke, I guess I'll back up 20 some years. I've spoke, just kids that knew my story. I would go like for a driver's training class or whatever, and I'd go speak as a guest. Well, finally, 2.5 years ago, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to start this up. So I called a buddy of mine that was an attorney, and he goes, man, I can't help you. My firm's going to charge you $6,000 to open it. And he goes, but I think I know a gal that might help you. So this gal, her name is Paloma Goggins with Nocturnal Legal. She goes, yeah, I'll help you. And she charged me $600. And I'm like, golden, let's do it. So open it up. And I wanted to start speaking in Idaho. That's where my mom, my sister were killed. And my dad and stepmom go to a non-denominational Christian church where people still knew my mom when they were alive. And so I went down there and talking to the minister. I don't know how it all came out about. I just keep trying to think about it, but I don't remember. But we figured out that his wife's grandmother was the first responder to my mom's wreck. And
Mm.
I'm like, whoa. My first question is she still alive? And they're like, yes, she is alive. So I was able to actually contact her and sit down with her for about 2 hours. And I asked her to tell me specifics, details of the wreck, if she could remember that. She goes, I've never forgotten it. And so she goes, she worked with my uncle, which was a deputy coroner in a neighboring county. And I said, okay. And so this sometimes gets me a little emotional, but she said when she drove up on the scene, there was an older lady that was the first on the scene, and that she must have been trained in like 4-H or something, because she had gauze on everybody. Of course, except my mom, my sister. My brother's arm was broke, she said, and was wrapped in gauze, and he was bleeding from the head, wrapped in the gauze. And she goes, the drunk driver was cut from the shoulder down to the groin, and he was wrapped in gauze. And she goes, the hardest thing I had to do, she goes, is transport the drunk driver and your brother in the same ambulance.
Mm.
She goes, there was a number of times I wanted to stop and kick him out. And I said, yeah, I'll bet that would be tough. And I said, tell me more details about things. And she goes, okay. She goes, they hit driver to driver head on. And I said, yeah. I said, my dad told me that. And she goes, when they hit, it popped the hood up of my mom's car and shoved it back through the windshield. And it killed my sister instantly. Back in 75, kids stood up in the front seat, and my sister was standing up, and the hood took her right here in the head
Oh.
and killed her instantly. It shoved her back in the seat like you'd normally sit. And she said my mom was leaning over my sister like she was trying to protect her and give her a hug, kind of thing. And I said, that makes perfect sense, because I said my mom's death certificate said she died moments after impact. So I really think that she had enough life in her to see that my sister was gone and leaned over to give my sister a hug. And that's
Mm.
how she passed. And, that's huge for me, because I get chills talking about this, uh, because I actually got to talk to somebody that could tell me a little bit about my mom's and sister's last moments. And so the best word that I can figure, I've thought about this a lot, is closure. I guess it gave me some closure with that, knowing that. Um, and knowing that and talking to her opened my dad up to talk to me a little bit more.
Mhm.
And he said that after the wreck and the funerals and stuff, I would go to my grandmother's house. She'd watch me while my dad was working. And the police officer that drove us to the hospital, his daughter was also being watched by my grandma. And I was telling that little girl that her dad killed my mom and my sister, which wasn't true. He was a police
Mm.
officer who took us to the hospital. And so the only way my dad would get me to stop saying that was he took me to the junkyard and showed me the pickup of the guy that killed my mom and my sister. And then I
Mm.
would stop saying that. Um, so all of this was really, really huge, you know. And um, so that's kind of where the story is at, and what I do with CARES Foundation, and the reason of CARES and that significant story that I just told you. I don't know if you can see this, but that's my logo.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's name was Karen. That's where the Kare comes from. And my sister was Shelly. That's CARES. And then this part of the leg of the K that wraps around the other leg is significant of my mom giving my sister that hug at her last moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was huge. And a friend of mine does professional logos, and he goes, "Man, I talked with him about it." And he goes, "I got to do something about the K." So he actually came up with that, and that was phenomenal. Um, but what we do at CARES Foundation is I'll go around to speak anywhere. I tell people if I have a sleeping bag and a floor, I'm good to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go to schools, I'll go to wherever. I went into private homes before, and they've invited friends over and just had a small intimate gathering. Um, but there's really four things that I talk about. I really thought about four things that could trip kids up in today's world. Um, One, peer pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I tell kids that use my story. I'm your friend. You can say, "Hey, my friend's mom and sister were killed by a drunk driver. That's why I choose not to do it." I said, "Your peer pressure goes away immediately."
Mm-hmm.
Um, the second thing is the drinking and driving and marijuana use. And it's very addictive today. I went around about 50 pot shops and asked questions. Very addictive what they're adding into it today.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Maybe back in the day when we were around younger, it wasn't addictive because they didn't add all the additives to it. And then the third thing I talk about is social media awareness and not knowing who they're talking to on the other end of their cell phones. Um, and I don't usually use the word stupid, but I tell kids that if you're going to be stupid enough to meet with somebody that you have never met on the other end of your cell phone, take like 6 or 7 of your friends with you, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And then the other thing is distracted driving. I had a friend of mine, him and his wife were both killed instantly, and their daughter was in the back seat and survived. And so I talk about those things that kids could trip kids up today. And then I also tell kids, we are all going to have a story in our life. No matter who we are, we have a story. And there's one point in our life that we can either turn to the right and do something positive and good, or you
Mm-hmm.
can turn to the left and do something bad and go to prison or jail, whatever, and not take the right path. So that's what I really try to do. I try to change my story, the tragedy, because it took me a long time to get through it, to something positive and trying to help kids. And I go into group homes as well. And it's that's just where my heart's at. My heart's at to save lives. And I will say I've already been contacted by two students and said that I have helped save them,
Mm-hmm.
which is all I set out to do is one. So I've done what I've done. I've accomplished it, but you know what? Now it's the mission to go even harder and further. Um, and then one other thing that we do is called Camp Cares,
Mm-hmm.
is trying to put on a camp that's for kids that have been affected by drugs and alcohol up out of Globe, Arizona. And, we're seeking funding for that now to be able to get that to happen. Right now, it's slated for June 6th through the 13th of this
Mm-hmm.
next summer. And so the goal is to have one that week long. And after we're done with that, the kids come down to the valley here, and we want to get together every quarter and just touch base with the kids, see how they're doing, build that relationship. And we're hoping that building that relationship, they will want to go out and help the peers, their own peers. And so we want to do one of those in all 50 states. Uh, it's a big task, but hey, we're up to it. And if you don't have big goals, you can't dream, right?
And that's
Uh,
right.
so
Oh man. I just put up here on this side, yes, the donate. This is the QR code that you can scan to donate because, like, yes, it's a foundation and it's a based, everything is based on donations. And what a better, I mean, this is such a lifelong process to get to this point where you're serving people and helping people through what you experienced. And even though you experienced that at the age of 3, and that's, obviously you don't have a lot of vivid memories from there, but you've been able to go through and figure out how it has affected your life, get through that, and then now put it into action and be like, look, this is not the end of the story. And it doesn't end with you. It
no,
continues, and you want to give it on to other people because, yes, drunk driving is not over.
no.
And you mentioned the distracted driving. I think that's just as bad. I mean, being on your phone, texting, whatever, reading something that while you're driving, that is just as bad because you're not paying attention and there's more and more cars. And I think that is a big thing to also kind of add. It's also kind of an addiction, right? We're kind of addicted to our
Yeah.
phones, to this
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
scrolling.
Absolutely. Yeah. I coached high school basketball for a little while, and I had this team, and I had a defense that you had to communicate, and my communication, they weren't communicating very well. And I noticed when I went on our first away game, everybody was on their cell phones, and there was one kid sitting behind the other texting each other. It's like, man, that just kind of hit me on my head. I'm like, okay, we got to do away with the cell phones,
Mhm,
And so I talked to parents. They said, there is no cell phones on away games now, or home games until the game's after done. And still, then even on away games, I wouldn't let them have their phones until they got back home,
mhm.
just because it's like communication. And that first time that they didn't have their phones, it was a silent bus. They didn't know
Mm.
how to talk. And one kid came up to me, he goes, "Can we bring card games or something?" And I said, "Yeah, you can bring a boombox too." And he looks at me like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Ask
Yes.
your parents." So, but they brought a radio, and it was loud. It was like, okay, you're communicating. It's good, And it was amazing how my defense picked up just
Yeah.
by that little thing. And we're terrible as adults. I mean, you look if you go in a restaurant down in here in the U.S., you'll look at it. One mother, father, kids, they're all on their phones. It's
Yeah.
like, man, let's communicate.
I know, yeah. I mean, I have to say sometimes, yes, I'm guilty of that too, but I try, obviously I'm not perfect either. And so trying to be more what do you say, conscious about it,
Yeah,
to when and when not and when to put it down. And I think, but that is probably one of the things that even though, yes, Camp Cares and, Cares Foundation is about educating about drunk driving, the effects of alcohol or other substances that
mhm,
obviously mess up your mind. And I think that's good. But also, one of the things that, because it is such a phenomenon that has come in the last couple of decades, is the phones and how they've evolved is probably one thing that should be touched upon. Just
yeah,
uh, because it is a distraction. I know the reason. Oh, I don't have a car, but I have a bicycle, and I did have an accident because I was trying to reach to my phone, which was in the bag at the back of my bike, and I didn't look at what's coming, and so I hit a curb. There we go. Luckily,
yeah,
I was wearing a helmet, but just like a basic example, that wasn't even driving a car.
yeah,
Imagine the consequences of that then.
yeah.
That was just a bicycle and just me, but it's enough. I have
Yeah.
permanent, you know, not damage, but permanent mark on my forehead from that. So there we go. And it's just one little example. And so, what is like the goal? What's the goal? What needs to happen? How much you're looking for in donations to make that first camp happen?
We are trying to raise 40,000, and it's tough right now. But we are trying to raise 40. It's going to cost a little bit more for the first one, just because we're trying to. I'm trying to get like a media company
Hmm.
there to be able to video and take some shots and really show what we're trying to do,
Hmm.
um, and so we can get it in other states and help more kids. So 40,000 is the goal.
Hmm.
Um, we're not very far right now into it. It's been really difficult. We're small,
Hmm.
so yeah. But it's going to happen. Camps can happen no matter what. Whether I have 75, 80 kids that we want to have there, or if it's 20 kids,
Yeah,
we're going to
exactly.
put it on.
Yeah, and that's the beginning. And from that one beginning, it is usually the hardest, right? And then after that, it is much easier to help it spread out to other states and have more kids and more people benefit from it. So now it's put out there, 40,000. It's going to come together. It's out there now, and our higher power, God's listening, and there we go. Here we go.
Yep.
It's going to
Amen
come.
to that. Yep. And I'm learning. I've never started a nonprofit before. I've been in
Mhm.
business before, and I'll tell you what, a nonprofit is probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Uh,
Yeah.
Other than going through the counseling, that was probably the hardest. But yeah, but it's also hard, but also very rewarding.
Mhm.
That I whew, I spoke at a camp this last summer, and this young girl contacted me, and I've got actually testimonial that I'm editing to be able to put on my website. But her name is Emmy, and from Eugene, Oregon, and she came up to me after the camp and talked to me a little bit, and then called me and said she wanted to do something for Cares Foundation. So her youth leader at their church did a little deal for me. Put good get together. It was a bingo night kind of thing, and I got to hear her story. And um, it's dad was addicted to drugs, and mom and dad got divorced. They moved, family moved, and Emmy was having some issues with anxiety and depression. And when I spoke at the camp, I just said, we all going to have a story, like I said, and we go through things, and it's about saying that I have a problem. That's your first thing, and then to ask for help. And
Mhm.
so she asked for that help after, and so she got some help, and she's just been thriving, and that's what her
Mhm.
mom said. And so it's just, it's wonderful. That's what makes everything that I do. And I get up in the morning, and all the people that say no, you can't do this, you can't do this, it's like I just think of her, and it's like, well, no, it's easy. I'm going straight for her. And that's why Emmy has given me even more fire to help
Mhm.
more kids because of that. And since then, I've talked with another gal that said our conversation a year ago has helped her to stop doing so many drugs as she was doing.
Mm.
Not totally off yet, but she's stopped doing a lot. So I'm like, okay, well, keep fighting. And so I will get to probably see her in another 2 months.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Congratulations. I mean, already that's two lives that you know of that are directly affected by what you do. So as a speaker, I mean, also for people who are listening or watching the replay or, recording, Todd goes and speaks. So, and you're not scared of traveling. So
So
don't have to be in Arizona in order to have Todd. He will travel to you and speak, and that is going to have an effect. I mean, I remember when I was in school, and all the people that came there to share the story about, there was one about drug abuse, and there was one about violence. All of those things, they made such an impact in my life. Like, I have become a pacifist. I do not know violence, and drugs I never ever dared to even try. And
yeah,
so there we go. I mean, it worked. And
yeah,
and it works in many ways. You probably have, changed or helped change little things or big things in many other people's lives. You just don't know about them.
yeah. And yeah, that's the goal. I mean, I I just want my mom and sister's legacy to live on.
Hmm.
Uh, and one other thing, my dad gave me a great gift in 2012. My dad, I had blown out my ankle. I had to live with my dad and stepmom for a little while, and my dad opened up a trunk that he had saved some of my mom's stuff, and he handed me my mom's purse that she had on her when she died. And
Mm,
he said, all he did was clean it up, and it has everything that was exactly like hers. And I take that around when I speak. And uh, I never know how I'm going to react to it. Sometimes I start crying. I just don't know from one point to the next. But man, that was a wonderful gift. That was the first time I was ever able to see my mom's handwriting.
mm,
And she has a full thing of Tic Tacs,
mm-hmm,
uh, and completely enclosed. I should call Tic Tac and find out how much full bottle from 1975 was worth.
mm.
But it
Oh,
was just kind
wow.
of crazy to be able to see those types of things and from back then.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I mean, we're like, I thought it was going to be 20 minutes, and now it's 25. And
Yeah,
But we could keep going,
Yeah,
for a long time. And I think we're going to do this again, Todd, in a few months and see how much closer we are to the goal, and actually even beyond the goal of 40,000. I would love to keep, this rolling so that we can get people donating and the word out there that this is available, this is possible, and everything. And the CARES Foundation is here to touch a lot of people's lives. And thank you, Todd, so much for being my guest today.
you're welcome. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate you.
Yes, me too. And I look forward to many more conversations with you and everyone who's watching, who's been watching, and who will be watching. Please leave comments and let us know if you have any questions, and we'll come back to you. So, next week, we're here with another guest, and yeah, look forward to it. And next week, by this time, actually, it's already the new year. So, enjoy the last days of this year. And yeah, the year will change whether you're sleeping or celebrating. So, do whatever you want. There we go. All right. Well, see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.